how do I deal with interviewing somebody who I can't stand, whose views are obnoxious, who I hate and loathe? How do I deal with that? Well, it happens again and again, week after week. My view of interviewing is that the best way to get, my job is not to be the star of the show. My job is simply to get the person I'm interviewing to say the most interesting, either news-provoking or simply interesting things I can get them to say at the time. And I'll use any technique to do that. By and large, shouting at them doesn't help. By and large, sneering at them doesn't help. What the best thing I have found is to look them in the eye with a nice smile on your face and ask the directest question you can. And then, if it's not answered, ask it again. Third time, if it's not answered, just point out to the viewer that they haven't answered the question and move on. So, you know, I absolutely have to maintain my cool. And there are people who I really don't get on with at all, who I've managed to have a perfectly pleasant conversation with on air, and then we go our separate ways. But I'm lucky in the sense that I'm not particularly ideological. I get on with all sorts of people, and I think that's very important. I don't have, I mean, the people on the far right of the spectrum, the far left of the spectrum, with whom I have been able to get on and have an amicable conversation, because I think that's partly my job, you know. It's not my job to interpose my views between them and the audience. But I have interviewed some incredibly obnoxious people.
Like who?
Sorry, the mic went. Among British artists today, and by the way, we're going through a great period in British art, I think, at the moment. There's two painters I'm particularly fond of. One is a purely abstract painter who is a bit like late Matisse, and she's called Gillian Ayres, and she's absolutely wonderful. She's now in her mid to late 80s, smokes like a chimney, drinks like a fish, spends most of her life wobbling at the top of a long ladder trying to paint huge pictures, and she's just getting better and better and better. And she walked out of art school in the early 1950s. She was going to be evacuated to Cambridge from London. Her parents couldn't bear to send her away, and so she was educated in a bomb shelter on the edge of Richmond Park with two other young girls who hadn't been sent away. One was Shirley Williams and one was Shirley Conrad. It must have been some bomb shelter. And Gillian just decided she was going to be an abstract painter when she was a very young woman, walked out of art college and started flinging pots of paint against walls and so forth, at the same time as the American abstract expressionists who then became incredibly famous for doing it. She never became famous in the same way, but ever since then she has done nothing really except paint all day, every day, and she's a great heroine of mine and a wonderful woman. The other one is Howard Hodgkin, who isn't really an abstract painter. He's really interesting because he is trying to paint representational pictures of moods and states of mind that he remembers in his past. So a lover, a bed, an evening in Venice, a conversation around a restaurant table and so forth. And he is trying to represent what went on there emotionally through the use of very sophisticated colour. Howard is another great of my heroes. He's a terrible man to interview because he cries about almost everything. You say to him, Howard, when did you first learn to paint? He goes, well, it was my father. Which I can sympathise with. And then you say, Howard, that's a very interesting Matisse up there. Just let's talk about the green at the top. He said, the green. He is, however, a genuinely colossal figure in modern painting, and so I would say Ayres and Hodgkin are right up there, alongside David Hockney. I think she did something that hasn't been done before, which is she took the experience of a kind of young, modern girl from a bad background and brought it right to the centre of the culture, so that we talk about her bed and the condoms and the cigarettes and the kind of mess and so forth. And she found a way of making people think about the kind of life that she'd been living, which was different and new. And I think she and Grayson Perry have brought their life experiences into art in a way that has changed the culture. I was talking to Hockney about Damien Hirst. I'm not a great Damien Hirst fan. And I said to him, what do you make of Damien Hirst? Hockney has this big sign up in his studio, by the way, which says, everything in this room was handmade by the artist himself. Which sounds like a dig. And I said, so what about Hirst? And he was all about the skull. He says, he you have to say about it, anyone who can make an image that nobody has made before and sticks in the mind has something. And I think that is true of Tracy Emin. One of the things I found most difficult when I did a lot of oil painting outside is that people will come and stand and look and stare, and it's quite off-putting, and it can be difficult, and you don't want to be rude and so forth. I was talking to, I won't say his name, quite a well-known artist about this, who said, yes, I was painting down in Cornwall, and I was struggling. I was beginning to get something down that I was really quite proud of, and this woman came and stood right beside me, said nothing for about 20 minutes, and I didn't lose my cool. I just kept on painting, kept concentrating, but I was unnerved. And then right at the end, she turned and said to me, "It's all right, dear, I can't paint either."
I was just wondering, have you seen any of George W. Bush's paintings? Did you like them, and what do you think they tell you about him as a person?
The answer is, as it were, one remove online, yes I have, no I didn't, and it's unrepeatable. I think it's interesting, he made almost everybody he'd ever had dealings with, his friends as well as his foes, look like unadulterated maniacs. They all had strange, drawn faces, wild eyes. Maybe that's the way he sees the world, but anyway, it wasn't an inspiring sight. Well, that's a big question. There's no doubt that the big world leaders do stick in the mind. I think the two cleverest people, interestingly, I have interviewed ever, not Boris Johnson, sorry Boris Johnson, not this time, are Putin and Obama, which is very interesting in terms of Putin, I think, is absolutely brilliant. He may be a bastard, he may be a swine, but he's a very, very clever man. I sat with an American journalist, two Russian journalists, a Chinese journalist, and a specialist sports journalist for 3 hours with Putin. And we fired at him every kind of question, every subject ranging from the obscurities of concrete contracts in Sochi right the way through to the attitude of the Dutch to gay marriage. And he had an answer, he was well prepared, he was fast, he was shrewd, he was occasionally very funny, he was a very formidable operator. So anyone says that they don't really understand how Putin comes to rule Russia, I understand. He's an extraordinary character. Obama, again, he's not exactly had a good couple of years, to say the least. But when I was interviewing him, it was just after the killing of Osama bin Laden. He's one of those people, and you watch their eyes when you're interviewing somebody. I never use notes on my knee because I like to keep eye contact for as long as possible during the interview. And I could tell I was asking some very, very clever question, which was going to get me to a point where he was going to say something he didn't want to say. I was working my way there. And he was seeing where I was going and heading me up at the pass 5 sentences ahead, and he was just a little smile in the corner of his face. He was very formidable and very funny. In domestic terms, I just like people who say stuff, preferably stuff that you don't expect them to say. And so, you know, everyone from Alex Salmond to Boris. Actually, Michael Gove from time to time could be a very interesting interviewee because he gets an idea in his head and he's not quite fast enough to stop his lips from uttering what he wants to say right at the first time. I think that, by the way, is a compliment a lot of the time. The ones who just drive me nuts, I'm not going to run through their names, but the ones you say, you know, basically I'm just saying, come on, say something interesting. It doesn't matter what you're going to say, just say something interesting. And they just repeat the party line with a wooden face. And they'll come out of the interview quite often afterwards and say, I think that went very well. And I will occasionally say to them, you've just been on live television in front of 2 million people, and you have said nothing memorable or interesting that's changed anyone's mind about how is that a good result? Ignorance, really. I was always interested in politics, but when I left university, I wasn't able to do anything. I could draw, but I couldn't. I mean, I had no skills, I had no financial knowledge at all, no trade, no easy way of finding an employable career, and therefore I thought of journalism. I'd done a job in Scotland eventually for the Scotsman as a general reporter. Eventually the Scotsman said they had a junior reporting job at Parliament, and I could come and do that. And so I came down to do that. From that point on, I was stuck down in Westminster, and for a journalist, Westminster is a gold mine. It's a story factory. And once you've been there for a while, it becomes addictive, and I just got stuck. I think that's the honest answer. Thank you all. very much. I've enjoyed it hugely. There is nothing I enjoy more than spending an hour or two listening to the sound of my own voice.